76 days. That is how long the community following this case has watched every press conference, tracked every tip, memorized the backpack, the pacemaker, the 41-minute window. And then, on a night in late April, the official verified account of the agency leading this investigation posted 4 words. The exact 4 words millions of people had been waiting to read. Nice update. Nancy has been located. The post was real. The account was real. And what came next is the reason this video exists. This analysis revisits verified public reporting to examine one specific communication event. No person referenced has been charged in connection with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. What follows is observation, not accusation. For the people who have been with this case from the beginning, the afternoon of April 17th did not arrive like any other day. It arrived the way every day has arrived since February 1st, with a check of the same accounts, a scroll through the same feeds, a refresh of the same sources. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, the FBI Field Office, Brian Anton at News Nation, the regional Tucson outlets, the family spokespeople, the verified reporters who have shown up at every press conference. These are the sources that matter. Everything else is noise. A community builds these habits when a case goes past week 2, past week 4, past the point where local news rotation would normally drop the story and move on. When a case stays alive past that point, when public interest holds through 11 weeks, when the reward climbs past $1 million, when the name Nancy Guthrie becomes one of those names people know without needing explanation, the way people consume information about that case changes entirely. It becomes a routine, a kind of watch. By day 76, the people watching had memorized things they had no reason to memorize. The description of the black 25-liter Ozark trail hiker pack, the masked suspect carried out of the house. The fact that pack was sold exclusively at Walmart. The presence of a pacemaker in the missing woman's medical history. The exact timestamp of the doorbell camera disconnection at 1:47 in the morning. The exact timestamp of the pacemaker's last sync at 2:28 in the morning. The 41-minute window between those two events. A window described by multiple sources as the most critical period in the entire investigation. The name of the private laboratory in Florida. The date of the FBI's first formal request for DNA evidence. The timeline of the crime scene opening and closing. The names of the witnesses. The neighbor who said they saw someone fleeing. These facts live in the community's head. Not because anyone asked them to, but because 76 days of following a case leaves residue. It accumulates. It builds a posture of waiting, and that waiting had one object. What the community had been waiting for, not hoping for, not expecting, but waiting for, was the announcement. The announcement that Nancy Guthrie had been found. Safe. Alive. Home. Whatever form that announcement would take, it was always going to come from one of a small handful of accounts. The leading candidate had always been the account of the agency running the investigation, the Pima County Sheriff's Department. Verified. Official. Institutional. On the final hours of a Thursday night in Arizona, that account posted 4 words. Most people who follow true crime cases follow them from a distance. A story breaks. They read an article. They form an opinion. They move on. The Nancy Guthrie case has not worked that way. Since the first week of February, hundreds of thousands of people have been following this investigation, with a level of engagement that looks less like true crime consumption, and more like something closer to vigil. They check multiple sources a day. They follow the specific reporters who break the specific updates. They read the court filings. They listen to the podcasts. They watch press conferences in full. They notice when a sheriff's department goes a month without speaking. They notice when a press conference is scheduled and then quietly canceled. They notice when the FBI's language shifts, and when the local agency's language does not. A notification from an official source in a case like this is not a notification in the sense most people understand that word. It is a moment. People stop what they are doing and read it. Often twice. A notification from the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the agency publicly named as the lead investigator on this kidnapping, carries a weight that even notifications from the FBI field office do not carry. Because PCSD is the agency closest to the case. Whatever breaks in this investigation is most likely, at some point, to appear first on that account. That was the context people were living in when the 4 words appeared. Understanding the weight of those 4 words requires understanding the weight of every non-communication that preceded them. Prior to April 16th, the Pima County Sheriff's Department had not issued a substantive statement on the Nancy Guthrie investigation since March 24th. That is a gap of more than 3 weeks. The most recent prior update before April 16th had concerned a warning about fundraising scams falsely claiming association with the case. The statement clarified that no legitimate GoFundMe campaigns were linked to the matter. That was it. That was the last word from the lead agency, until April 16th. During those 3 weeks and change, the case had not gone quiet. If anything, it had intensified. Independent coverage continued. Reward money climbed. Speculation grew. Journalists kept digging. Families of other missing persons reached out. Private investigators weighed in publicly. The community's hunger for information grew in inverse proportion to the official silence. When an agency goes silent for that long, in an active, high-profile investigation, the community filling that silence does not stay neutral. It grows impatient. It grows suspicious. It grows hungry for any communication at all. By the time the department broke its silence on April 16th, that hunger had built up a head of pressure. Every word the department finally said was going to be read through that pressure. And then, on the same calendar day, they said more words. 4 of them. I'm update. Nancy has been located. 4 words. 1 hyperlink. 1 attached image. The phrasing was the phrasing the community had been waiting for. The name alone. Not a missing person located. Not subject recovered. Not adult located safe. The name. The literal name Nancy, without a surname, without a clarifying context, without a preceding sentence that would have reframed which Nancy was meant. Just Nancy located. Nosh, Saudis. For anyone who had been inside this case for 76 days, the phrase was not a phrase. It was the phrase. The one the family had been waiting for. The one investigators had been hoping to post. The one reporters had been preparing to break. The one no one in the community had allowed themselves to fully imagine, because imagining it meant facing the possibility that the opposite was the outcome. A verification mark sat next to the handle. The account was not a parody. It was not a fan page. It was not a rumor aggregator. It was at Pima Sheriff. The official voice of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. The same account that had, over the previous 76 days, posted every sanctioned update, every press release, every missing persons flyer, every clarification. Whatever happened in the seconds after that post appeared in people's timelines happened with the full institutional weight of that verified account behind it. The post did not consist of text alone. It included an image, a missing persons flyer, in the same style that law enforcement agencies across the country use to share information about vulnerable individuals. The flyer showed a woman's face. It showed the word Lex La Flyer printed in bold red lettering across the image. It used the format and the color scheme and the visual grammar of a standard missing persons update. What it resembled, at first glance, was the style of flyer the community had seen attached to updates about Nancy Guthrie throughout the investigation. Red text, bold type. A woman's face. The word the community had been waiting to see, stamped across the image. What it did not include, what any reader would have expected a post of this gravity to include, was the surname of the subject. Without a surname, the image and caption together produced a specific effect. To a reader who had not yet clicked the hyperlink, who was reading the post as it appeared in the feed, the post read as an announcement about the case they had been following. It was not. The moment of reading, the moment before the click, had already happened. And it had happened hundreds of thousands of times, in hundreds of thousands of notification centers, across a community that had rehearsed that exact moment in its head for 76 days. One commenter on the platform summarized the collective experience in a single line. It was typed in all capitals. The heart had dropped. Another wrote that for a moment, the person writing had thought the woman in the image was the woman they had been following. A third asked how difficult it could possibly be to include a last name. These were not outliers. These were the first wave of replies to a verified law enforcement post. The post went live in the final minutes of a Thursday night in Arizona. For much of the United States, that meant a notification landing in the last stretch before bed. For others, especially on the East Coast, where the clock had already crossed midnight, it meant a post that surfaced first thing Friday morning, when phones were unlocked and feeds were refreshed. The community reaction began within minutes. Whatever one thinks about the wording of the original post, the response from the people who had been following this case was not ambiguous. It was not slow. It was not quiet. It was the reaction of a community that experienced, in the span of reading 4 words, the entire arc of an emotional event it had been preparing for 76 days. The realization that the announcement had arrived, and the subsequent realization that maybe it had not. The shape of that community reaction, as it unfolded across the first hour, the second hour, and the hours that followed, constitutes a public record of what it feels like to live inside the communication environment this case has produced. The replies did not come from one demographic or one corner of the platform. They came from people who had been on this case the way people are on a case they care about. And what those people did when the post appeared in their feeds, is the same thing any of them would have done if those 4 words had meant what those 4 words looked like they meant. They reacted. And then, with the dawning awareness that something about the post was not matching the anticipated announcement, they clicked. If you're following this case closely, and if this kind of analysis is useful to you, please consider subscribing. The work here is independent, source-based, and built around the questions the community is actually asking. Supporting the channel keeps this coverage going. Because the post appeared on a public platform, the reaction to it is preserved in a way that reactions to most law enforcement communications are not. The replies, hundreds of them, visible on X in the hours that followed, are themselves now a kind of primary document. Reading through those replies, a clear 3-stage pattern emerges. The first wave is not skeptical, it is receiving. People wrote that their hearts had skipped, that they had looked at the image and thought for a moment it was the woman whose case they had been following, that the initial read of the post had hit them like the announcement they had been preparing to receive. The second wave is correction. As replies began arriving from users who had clicked the link, the community realized the post was not what the first wave had assumed. The language in the replies shifted, from relief, to confusion, to frustration. The confusion compounded as newer users arrived at the post, read the caption, and produced the same initial reaction the earlier users had produced minutes before them. The third wave is accountability. Users demanded to know why the surname had been omitted. They pointed out that the department's previous missing persons posts had consistently included full names. They asked how a communications team at an agency running one of the highest-profile active investigations in the country could have published a post with those specific 4 words without anticipating what the community following that investigation would read. One reply told the account to post the last name. Another said the omission seemed deliberate. Another asked only for a simple clarification. Another described the post as shameful. Another thanked the department for locating the woman in question, while also registering the cost of the phrasing. The post stood through all 3 waves of response. It was not deleted. It was not appended with a clarification. It was not quoted in a follow-up post with an apology or correction. It simply remained on the timeline, attached to the verified account, visible to anyone who scrolled. The same 24 hours in which the asterisk Nancy has been located post went live also contained something else. Something the community had been demanding for weeks. Earlier that day, the Pima County Sheriff's Department had issued its first substantive public communication about the Nancy Guthrie case since March 24th. The statement, posted on the same exact account, addressed ongoing coordination with the FBI, the DNA evidence, and the transfer of an original hair sample to the FBI laboratory for advanced analysis. The timing of that statement, placed on the same calendar day as the Nancy has been located tie post, is its own layer of significance. For more than 3 weeks, the department had been silent. For more than 3 weeks, the community had been filling that silence with interpretations, theories, frustrations, and then, within a span of hours, the department produced 2 communications on its verified account. The first was the DNA statement, substantive, relevant to the Nancy Guthrie investigation, the first of its kind in almost a month. The second was the asterisk Nancy has been located side a post. A post that, while referring to a different investigation entirely, was indistinguishable in its phrasing from an announcement about the very case the earlier statement had concerned. 2 communications. One day, one community, reading both through the same frame. The whiplash between them. The relief of a new statement, followed by the vertigo of a phrasing that read like an entirely different kind of statement, is itself the event the community has been processing. The DNA statement is worth examining in detail. The department said its agency has worked with the FBI since the beginning of the investigation, which was not new information. It said the private laboratory it uses in Florida continues to share information with the FBI laboratory and with partner laboratories across the country. It said DNA analysis remained ongoing. Around and before that statement, context from NewsNation senior correspondent Brian Anton had already appeared publicly. According to Anton, DNA evidence from the Guthrie home had been sent to the FBI laboratory for advanced analysis. The evidence included hair found inside the home. This transfer came after evidence had already been tested through the Florida laboratory the department used. The FBI, in a statement provided to ABC News, framed the development somewhat differently. The federal agency said the material was not new. It said the FBI had requested the material more than 2 months earlier. It said the Pima County Sheriff's Office had sent the evidence to a private laboratory in Florida. It said 11 weeks later that laboratory had transferred an original hair sample to the FBI laboratory for testing. The word SAMPS 11 in that federal statement is doing significant work. 11 weeks. That is the interval between the sample's arrival at the private Florida laboratory and its transfer to Quantico. That is the interval the federal statement is calling attention to. On the analytics side, genetic genealogist C.C. Moore, appearing on the Brian Anton Investigates program, described the development as potentially significant. She said that hair, with recent advancements in the field, can make a case solvable. Her framing was cautious. Her framing was also hopeful. Former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffendafer, speaking on her own true crime podcast that weekend, was less measured. She said that when she read about the Florida laboratory route, she shook her head. She said that if the Florida laboratory did not have the advanced technology needed, the evidence should never have been sent there to begin with. That it should have gone directly to the FBI laboratory from the outset. That she believed the FBI would have agreed to that approach if it had been asked. The department's DNA statement on its own is an institutional statement, carefully framed, worded to minimize surprise. The statement of an agency trying to describe continuity, where federal language is describing friction. That was the substance the department offered on April 16th, after more than 3 weeks of silence. And then hours later, a second post. A post that used a very different set of words entirely. The hyperlink embedded in the asterisk update, "Nancy has been located" post, did not lead to an update on the Guthrie investigation. It led to a different page, a different case, a different woman. Her name was Nancy Radakovich. She was 82 years old. She had been reported missing the day before April 16th from an area near River Road and Campbell Avenue in Tucson. She was described in the department's initial missing persons post as a vulnerable adult. Her full name, Radakovich, had been included in the original flyer when the department first asked the public for help locating her. When she was found safe before 8 p.m. local time on April 16th, the department posted the update that appeared in the community's timelines. Update: Nancy has been located. The name Radakovich did not reappear in the update post. The flyer image showed a face. The flyer showed the word "safe located." No surname appeared anywhere a scrolling reader would register before clicking the hyperlink. For the community following the Nancy Guthrie case, the post produced, in the seconds before the link resolved, the effect of an announcement about the other Nancy. The Nancy they had been waiting 76 days to hear about. The effect was brief. And it was shared. The replies show it. The screenshots show it. The reaction was not isolated to a few unusually invested viewers. It was communal. It was an entire community reading the post the way that community had been trained to read that account. The recovery itself, the fact of Nancy Radakovich being found safe, is worth acknowledging. Any time an elderly, vulnerable adult is located alive, that outcome is worth marking. The department did the work of locating her. The substance of the recovery was real. That is a separate matter from the question of what the announcement of that recovery did to a community that had been reading every word from that posting account for 11 weeks through the frame of a different missing woman. There is one additional detail that some readers found especially striking once they learned which Nancy the post referred to. Nancy Radakovich had last been seen near River Road and Campbell Avenue. Local reporting placed that location less than 2 miles from the home where Nancy Guthrie disappeared in the early morning hours of February 1st Street. Less than 2 miles. In a different city, the overlap might register as coincidence and nothing else. In Tucson, in April of 2026, in a community that had spent 76 days studying maps of that specific neighborhood, maps of the Catalina foothills, maps of the routes in and out, maps of the positions of cameras and fences and doorbell devices, the distance did something to the post beyond the surname omission. The geography reinforced the confusion. 2 elderly women, both named Nancy, both reported missing, both within a 2-mile radius, both with announcements flowing from the same verified law enforcement account. All of it compressed into a 24-hour window. A community that had been studying the map for months suddenly had to rearrange its mental picture. None of this is an accusation of bad faith. The Pima County Sheriff's Department did locate Nancy Radakovich. That is a positive outcome. The work of finding a vulnerable elderly adult alive is always work worth acknowledging. The question the community is asking is not whether the recovery happened. The question is why the communication about that recovery used the specific phrasing it used, on the specific account it used, on the specific day it used, without the simple addition of a surname. By itself, the asterisk Nancy has been located post would be a strange choice of words. A single oversight, an incident that any communications team could generate on a busy night, but the post does not sit by itself. It sits inside a pattern. For weeks, the Pima County Sheriff's Department's communication on the Nancy Guthrie case has drawn consistent criticism from the community following the investigation. Sheriff Chris Nanos has faced questions about the early handling of the crime scene, when it was opened, when it was closed, when it was reopened, and what that sequence of decisions may have meant for the preservation of evidence. The sheriff's relationship with the FBI has been publicly questioned, including by at least one former FBI special agent who, on her own podcast in the days immediately following April 16 and April 17, described the handling of DNA evidence as a decision she would not have made. The department has, across this investigation, produced a communication posture that has regularly been contextualized or corrected by federal statements. When the Florida laboratory transfer was first reported, the FBI's public statement to ABC News provided context the department's own framing had not included. Specifically, the length of time the sample had been held before its transfer to Quantico. When Sheriff's Department statements have touched on the scope of FBI involvement, the federal agency has at times characterized the coordination differently. Against that backdrop, a verified post-reading update. Nancy has been located, without a surname, without an immediate clarification, without a follow-up correction once the community response emerged, does not land as an isolated error. It lands as one more communication event inside a long sequence of communication events that have cumulatively eroded public trust. That erosion is something the community has been describing for weeks. The April 17 post is not the cause of it. The post is a symptom of it. And the symptom matters because of what the underlying condition appears to be. The thing about this post that has stayed with some of the people who saw it is not what the post said. It is what was never posted afterward. In the hours after the community reaction emerged, after the first replies, after users began demanding a surname, after screenshots began circulating, a basic communication response would have been available to the department. A quoted clarification, a follow-up post, a sentence reading something like, "To clarify, this update refers to the Nancy Radakovich case, which is unrelated to the ongoing Nancy Guthrie investigation, which remains active." A small thing. A routine thing. That communication does not exist. The original post remains on the timeline as of the preparation of this analysis. No public follow-up from the department's account has appeared directly addressing the confusion generated by the phrasing. The community is aware of this. The replies continue to register that awareness. Each scroll through the account renews the absence. The absence of that follow-up is itself a communication event. Silence. In the wake of criticism, from an agency that has been criticized for silence throughout this entire investigation, compounds the prior silence rather than resolving it. The department had, in the same 24-hour window, demonstrated that it was able to post. It released the DNA statement. It then released the asterisk "Nancy has been located" nice post. A third post, one that simply clarified the second, would have taken whoever runs that account a matter of minutes. It did not happen. What is communicated by the fact that it did not happen is itself part of what the community is now reading. If you have followed this case, really followed it, across months, across press conferences, across late-night refreshes of the same feeds, you have probably noticed that the community around Nancy Guthrie has begun to change shape. Something is happening in this community that has not happened in most of the major missing persons cases of the last several years. The people watching have become students of the communication itself. They are not only reading the updates, they are reading the gaps between the updates. They are counting the weeks between statements. They are noticing when federal language differs from local language. They are tracking the specific words that get used, and the specific words that do not. That level of attention is not a feature of an investigation running smoothly in the eyes of the people watching it. It is a feature of a breakdown in the relationship between the investigation and the public. The investigation has asked for help. If this kind of analysis is useful to you, if you want to stay with this case through the FBI laboratory analysis, through whatever genetic genealogy work is underway, through whatever the next communication from the lead agency turns out to be, please subscribe. It keeps this work going, and it helps the community stay informed without the noise. The question the community is asking after 76 days of this pattern is not a single question. It is a set of related questions, all of them specific, all of them reasonable, none of them answered. Why was a post-reading update? Nancy has been located, a phrase anyone inside this case would recognize as the single most anticipated phrasing associated with this investigation, published without a surname, given the full context in which the posting account operates. Why, once the confusion emerged in the replies, was no clarifying post issued from the same account? Why did the department break more than 3 weeks of silence on the Guthrie case on the same calendar day as the Nancy has been located post, producing a compression of communication the community experienced as a single confusing event? Why has the agency leading the investigation needed its communications contextualized or corrected by federal statements on multiple occasions? What is the editorial process inside the Department for Public Communications in an active, high-profile kidnapping case and who inside that agency is accountable for the content of posts issued under the agency's verified account. And underneath all of these, in an active kidnapping investigation of this scale, one in which the lead agency has repeatedly asked the public for tips, for engagement, for money, for time, for vigilance, what is the operating assumption about how that public is expected to receive communication from the agency running the case? None of these questions are speculative. Each one is answerable. None of them has been answered. 3 seconds is not a measurement of time. It is a framing the community has adopted to describe the interval between reading the 4 words and clicking the link. Some people experienced it as longer. Some experienced it as instantaneous. For some, the feeling persisted even after the link resolved, because the brain had already committed to the interpretation the first reading produced. The larger point of that framing is not that the interval was short. The larger point is that the interval existed for any duration in the timelines and feeds and notification centers of hundreds of thousands of people following this case. The phrase "the community had been waiting 76 days to read" appeared under the verified account of the agency running the investigation. Whatever follows the link, the surname, the clarification that never came, does not erase the fact of that interval. That interval is what the community is talking about. It is what the community will remember when the next post from the department appears. It is what will color the reading of every future update for as long as this investigation remains open. Once an audience has been conditioned to read a verified account in a particular way, that conditioning does not unwind on command. It compounds. The next post from the department's account, whatever it says, whenever it appears, will be read through the memory of April 17th. The post that almost said the thing the community had been waiting to hear. That is a form of institutional cost that is difficult to quantify. And difficult to reverse. Nancy Guthrie remains missing. That is the fact this analysis is built around. And the fact this analysis cannot escape. 76 days after she was last seen, on the night of January 31st, before the garage door closed at 9:50, before the doorbell camera was disconnected at 1:47 in the morning, before the pacemaker disconnect at 2:28, before the 41-minute window closed, her location is unknown. The FBI laboratory at Quantico now holds an original hair sample that the Florida laboratory transferred after 11 weeks. The analysis is ongoing. Genetic genealogy work through researchers like C.C. Moore is in the public record. The combined reward offered for information leading to her recovery has exceeded $1.2 million, including the $1 million posted by the Guthrie family. The FBI tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI, remains active. The case is active. The investigation has not ended. None of the substantive investigative work described in the April 16 DNA statement has been contradicted by anything in this analysis. The work of finding Nancy Guthrie, the forensic analysis, the federal coordination, the investigative process, the geographic search, the digital evidence review, continues at multiple laboratories and across multiple agencies. What this analysis has examined is not the investigation. It is one specific communication event attached to the investigation, and the question of what that event means for the relationship between the lead agency and the public the agency has been asking for help. Those are different things. Both can be true. The agency can be doing investigative work that is serious, competent, and ongoing. And the agency's public communication can have produced, on April 17th, an event the community cannot unread. Holding those two ideas at once is what the community has been doing for weeks. It is what this analysis is trying to do. And it is what any fair assessment of this moment has to do, because reducing either to the other collapses the actual shape of what has happened. The community that has gathered around this case over 76 days is not a hostile community. It is a community that wanted, from day one, from press conference one, from tip one, to help. That is what the reward funds are for. That is what the tip lines are for. That is what the endless scrolling through maps and neighborhood photos and Walmart security footage and Ozark Trail backpack listings is for. The people who have stayed with this case have stayed with it because they believe the case can be solved. And because they believe public attention is part of how it gets solved. What has been wearing that community down, not the investigation itself, but the communication around the investigation, is the sense that the relationship with the lead agency has not been reciprocal. The community has produced tips. It has funded rewards. It has studied evidence. It has shown up. On April 17th, in the final minutes of a Thursday night, the communication it received in return was a post that read, "To the community," that had been reading every post from that account, as if the announcement had finally come. It had not. The post can be explained by routine bureaucratic process. An overworked social media. The question that, whether or not the agency ever answers it, the community is going to keep asking. If you are the agency running this investigation, and you publish an update to a community that has been watching for 76 days, Do you not know what those 4 words are going to read as? If you want to stay with this case, through the FBI laboratory analysis, through whatever the next communication from the lead agency turns out to be, please subscribe. The coverage here is source-based, independent, and built around the questions the community is actually asking. Every subscription tells the algorithm this case still matters. Nancy Guthrie has not been located. That is still the truth of April 18th, April 19th, April 20th, and every day, the community will keep showing up to check. Whatever 4 words eventually do confirm her recovery, if they ever come, they will be read through the memory of the 4 words that came first. A communication environment in which a verified institutional account can publish the anticipated phrasing for a different case. On the same day, it breaks nearly a month of silence on the case that anticipated phrasing belongs to, is a communication environment the lead agency built. And the lead agency now has to live inside. That is the inheritance of April 17th. That is what the community will be reading every future update through. And that is the question this investigation, in its 77th day and every day after, has not yet had to answer. This video is an act of independent journalism, grounded in publicly reported information drawn from verified sources, including the Daily Caller, Men's Journal, International Business Times, Reality TV Entertainment, Now Parade, Front Page Detectives, American Tribune, CBS News, Fox 10 Phoenix, and News Nation, as well as direct public posts from the official Pima County Sheriff's Department X account and statements provided by the FBI to ABC News. Links to all cited sources appear in the description below. No person referenced in this analysis has been charged with, or convicted of, any crime in connection with Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. Observations offered about patterns of institutional communication refer to public communication events only, based on the public record, and are not accusations of wrongdoing or misconduct. Quoted community reactions are drawn from public replies to a public social media post on a verified account. Analysis of public interest matters of this kind is protected under long-standing principles of journalism and free expression. This work is offered to a community that has been following this investigation since February 1, 2026, with the hope that careful public scrutiny supports, rather than obstructs, the shared interest in finding Nancy Guthrie.